Warning, this content may be disturbing to some audiences. Subscribe. If you dare.
The gun was against my forehead. I closed my eyes for a second and honestly thought, this is it. This is really it. This is happening. It's not like on TV. Hey everybody, welcome to Anecdost. People ask Reddit. What's the most horrible thing your family/friends have done to you in life?
Number 1.
Commenter. My grandfather verbally abused my mother when she was 20, put her and her brother in an orphanage, and insulted my grandmother, then married his brother's wife. Person B. My grandfather verbally abused all 3 of his daughters, my aunts, got the youngest one out of the house when she was 21 and sent her away to have the baby and put it up for adoption. My grandmother knew completely what was going on. This was in the late 1950s. I didn't find out until 30 years after he died, and it was a pretty weird feeling to learn that my grandpa was a horrible person. I suddenly had tremendous sympathy for my poor old aunt, whose life has been pretty much nothing but shit, and who has lived on welfare for the past 20 years. I can't even imagine how badly her head was messed up by that shit.
Number 2.
When I was 11, my father stripped me down in front of a mirror, wrapped his arms around me from behind, and very calmly and dispassionately told me every single reason why nobody would ever love me, mostly relating to my body and appearance. Then when he was done with that, he insulted me. I've never admitted that to anyone before now, and I've seen my fair share of therapists over the past 6 years.
Number 3.
When I was a teenager, my dad flipped his shit. I'm not sure what over, I don't remember. I walked over and stood in the doorway of his room. I started angrily fighting with him, ridiculing him for his illogical and overly emotional state. Blasting him with bits of truth that I was not shy about letting him have, though in every other aspect of my life I am shy. Then the gun was against his head. I switched my strategy and started trying to talk him down. I don't remember a single thing I said. But then the gun was against my forehead. I closed my eyes for a second and honestly thought, this is it. This is really it. This is happening. It's not like on TV, and opened them again. He was talking. And then his finger started to move. At the last second I kind of saw his eyes look surprised and he jerked his hand, shooting out the back door window behind me. He stalked behind me as I stood there, my ears ringing and my face hot where the gunpowder hit the side of my head. He ripped out our phone lines and there's this gap in my memory. I think I went back to my room to sit on my computer and pretend shit isn't happening. My brother came running in and said Dad had just taken an entire bottle of one of his pills. I went back into pissy angry defense mode and chewed everyone out as I tried to repair the phone line to call 911. He'd really messed it up this time, no, not the first time, so I ran to our only neighbors, sweet older man, trying to figure out a cover story that would get the ambulance here fast enough to save Dad's life and not let our neighbor know what just happened. I couldn't think of anything, so I just told him I needed to call 911 and he overheard the rest. I left out the gun bit and just said he took a bottle of pills. Even though there was a fire station, with an ambulance and EMT crew that could assemble in moments, 5 minutes from our house we were just over the county line. So the nearest crew wouldn't be at our house for 25 minutes, and that's ambulance driver flooring at time. I think it ended up taking them longer, but it's not like I was looking at a clock. So Jim, the neighbor, asks if we need more help, but he doesn't know what to do. I don't blame him. I ran back home to keep my dad conscious. The 911 operator didn't say anything about that, but I figured it was a good idea. When I got back, my brother was sitting still on the couch watching TV in this zombie-dazed state. Dad wasn't in his room. I had to scream and scream to get my brother to answer me where Dad had gone, and when he finally noticed, he told me he'd wandered into the woods. We lived on an acre next to a heavily wooded area, to die. I went running into the woods barefoot trying to find him. I was worried it would take forever to find him, but I went along the more well-known path and found him collapsed in a semi-clear area pretty easily. Which was a boon at that point. He dragged a blanket with him and was semi-wrapped and losing consciousness. So I kept trying to keep him sitting up, and I pet his hair and told him I loved him and begged him not to die on us. He kept saying, "What's in it for me?" Quick fact, my mom at this point had decided to leave her quasi-normal life and literally become a crack whore. She'd also taken the other 2 children with her and turned them into drug mules and let her boyfriend repeatedly hit my little sister. She was 8. We didn't know at the time, and it had almost been my fate as he'd taken a shining to me first, but then I jumped ship to live with my dad. Finally the ambulance shows up and I see the lights flashing in the distance. I tried dragging him, but that didn't work, even though I was pretty fit. So I just yelled really loudly where I was and tried to direct the EMTs best I could. They came and got him and I was oddly calm and described what happened. They searched his pockets out there. Dunno why? And threw a bunch of drugs and like 3 more guns into the forest floor so he wouldn't get in trouble. Got him up in the ambulance, then had me try to find the bottle of pills he took. My brother was still sitting there, glassy-eyed, non-watching TV. I gave them the bottle and tried to get back in the ambulance, but they wouldn't let me. Apparently they'd already induced vomiting and it was bad. 2 cop cars had shown up right after them, and one cop had been sort of leaning on his cruiser with his arms folded looking at the scene. When Dad was being loaded into the ambulance, the cop looked at his watch and loudly announced, "F it, my shift's over," and left. The one who stayed kinda talked to me and was really nice and understanding. Though he said we weren't allowed to sleep there alone. I was like 15, so it shouldn't have been a big deal, but he insisted. So I said we would stay over at our neighbor's house and he accepted. They took my dad away and my brother and I ended up spending the night over at our neighbor's. We I don't know why, but we ended up not sleeping on the bed in the guest room but sort of huddled together on the floor. We're not really close, so it was odd. He was in the hospital overnight, then spent the rest of the week being in a mental hospital. In his absence, I cleaned the house top to bottom and even bleached the kitchen floors. I had just finished drying them off when his girlfriend brought him home. He walked in the door, looked at me and said, "I don't appreciate what you did." Then went into his room and shot heroin for 3 days. This was the good parent.
Number 4.
When I was 6, my brother and I were arguing about what the correct line in a movie was, and he hit me in the face with a dictionary. It knocked one of my front baby teeth out with such force that it flew to the back of my throat and I actually gagged and choked on it for a few seconds before it worked its way down. I actually swallowed my own tooth. He then told my mother that I ripped my own tooth out and threw it away to get him in trouble. Another time he punched me in the face and gave me a bloody nose, and then told my mother I stuck a pencil up there to make it bleed to get him in trouble.
Number 5.
In addition to years of verbal and physical abuse, my dad used to neglect me all day while my mom was out at work. This was back in the day before I could take care of myself, from the time of my first memory around 18 months up until I was 3 or 4 years old. When I was between 2 and 3 years old, per usual, he would only feed me if he came out to make for himself, and of course it was only the scraps left over that he couldn't fit on his plate. He gave me a small bowl of spaghetti with tomato sauce, which I was not too keen on eating. I asked for something else, as toddlers are wont to do, and he said if you're not gonna eat like a person, you can eat like an animal, at which time he dumped the contents of the bowl onto the floor. He then proceeded to take 3 or so hours off of work to sit there watching me until I was hungry enough. Remember, I hadn't been fed since early morning, around maybe 6 a.m., and it was late in the afternoon, almost dinner time, to eat off the floor. The whole time he sat there laughing at me and then made me clean it up.
Number 6.
I am now 42 years old, a disabled veteran with PTSD, chronic major depression, and a whole mess of physical limitations. I got PTSD and depression from my family life. I had no idea what life was like without beatings and constant fear until I left at age 17. My brother started trying to hit me when I was 6 months old. He stabbed me in the back with a seam ripper from my mom's sewing table. He got more creative later. When I was 2 or 3, he coerced me into eating Sonny Flush, told me it was candy. Not long after that, he tried the clothes dryer, told me to get in, and then told Mom it was loaded and ready to go. He continued trying for years, throwing steel fence posts at me and hitting my head, beating me unconscious, and reveling in my pain and torture. I don't remember him not hitting me at random. It was my entire life until I turned 16 and kicked his ass. He hated me, and took great pleasure from seeing me in pain or knocked out. When he wasn't beating me, he was ridiculing me, and getting our parents pissed at me. He tried to hit me over 100 times, each time was more severe. He almost did it by accident when he was driving drunk and wouldn't allow me to wear a seatbelt. He told the kids at school I was gay, so I was beaten by them as well. When I was about 8 or 9, my dad started hitting, kicking, as well as verbally, emotionally, and mentally abusing me. I am thankful I was never sexually abused. I would dread hearing him pull in the driveway or having to go work the fields with him. I was kicked so hard I limped for over a month, and he did it with the neighbor's daughters watching. Kicked the shit out of me until I dropped in the mud, and he continued until he realized everyone was watching. He bruised me worse than my brother would in places I couldn't hide. I told the high school principal a horse bit me when I had a bruise so deep and angry on my neck it turned black. I wanted to hit them, especially my brother. I nearly did twice, but since someone else was there and in the way, I couldn't shoot him without hitting the other kid. Also, I knew if I hit him my life would be forever changed, and I would probably have never had a life worth living. Maybe prison time, or foster care, and I certainly wouldn't have been able to enlist to make something of myself. My dad and I have made amends. He knows what he did was wrong, and I understand how much stress and pressure he was under with 6 kids, working on a farm in the 70s and 80s. It isn't an excuse for him, but I understand he wasn't trying to kill or torture me like my brother was. I could tell when Dad was pissed and I was about to get a beating. I had no idea when my brother would start or stop. I grew up thinking it was normal to scream at each other, that it was normal to get beaten. I thought everyone did, since I was getting it everywhere I went, from almost everyone I met. What did this do to me? It made me unafraid of death, almost impervious to pain. I got big and muscular from wrestling and the first Gulf War. Nobody scares me, nothing frightens me, and if I knew I could get away with it, killing someone isn't a problem. That served me well in the desert, but in civilian life it has almost caused me some big problems. I have nearly killed kids over minor things, and lucky for me someone I knew stopped me before I really hurt them. I have been hospitalized 3 times, every relationship I have had has failed, until last year. I almost lost the best woman I have ever known, because I yelled too often at inanimate objects, though never at her. She taught me how to live like a normal person, how people in society act, and that it isn't okay to let anger run my life. She has helped with the nightmares, and learning to limit my mental condition's effect on her has helped me have a better life. I owe her my life, and her leaving me last year was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it motivated me to face my past, deal with it, talk to my parents about it, and stop hiding and avoiding life. I opened up my emotions that had been buried for 30 years for her, leaving myself vulnerable and exposed to the world. Before her I felt only numb, angry, and blind rage. She made me understand what it is to be human, and I now know how love feels, where before I was just terrified of being alone. I pity the person who ever harms her, for they will unleash the beast she has helped me put away. Make sure to share your personal story in the comments below and have the opportunity to be featured in a future video. Also, if you like these topics, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification button to continue seeing more content like this every day. See you next time.